Hi everybody, welcome to part 21 of Learning to Draw with Andrew Loomis' Fun with a Pencil. And today we are going to work on hands, and underneath here you see feet, and also a little bit of shoes as well. So in the past, Andrew Loomis, so far as if we go back a little bit, he has drawn in our figures, we have drawn the hands like a mitten basically, which is basically taking the form and drawing this rough outline. This is what we've been drawing so far up to this point. And the reason this is a good thing to do is because it allows us to focus on the figure, drawing the figure as a skeleton, adding meat to the skeleton, drawing the overall forms and so forth. That makes it a lot simplified. But as we've learned in the last video to draw clothing, at least an introduction to clothing, now it's going to be helpful for us to learn how to draw hands and feet so that we are equipped for the next video in which we'll be drawing the whole figure with clothing on. So we're combining all these little elements and working at it as parts. By the way, if you're new to the channel, I'm so glad you're here. My channel has videos about artworks that I've done. It has time-lapse videos of my art. And I'm teaching art through my channel currently with our Learning to Draw with Andrew Loomis' Fun with a Pencil. So I really enjoy this book by Andrew Loomis, and I feel like it's a really good introduction. And I feel like it's very easy to grasp, and I hope that by having a living, breathing artist today, taking what he wrote down and drew and explaining these concepts and kind of decomplicating it a little bit, uncomplicating it a little bit, that this is going to be a helpful tool for you if you're new to art, if you're new to drawing, you want to learn to draw better, you want to improve your drawing skills, so forth. So a little bit about me too is I'm an illustrator based in Cincinnati, Ohio. I've worked for over 10 years for private clients and business clients, producing portraits, murals, illustrations, a little bit of illustrations for books as well. And I've taught art in some local schools, and I've went to art college as well, so I went through all this, and now I've actually read this book as well. And here we go, let's jump in. So if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, or hang around a little while, see if you like the content, and then hit the subscribe button. But we're just happy that you're here. Okay, so he's drawn it like a mitten like this, and then you can divide it. The one thing I will say about this book is it doesn't go into a step-by-step how to draw the hand, which may come in another one of his books that I've not read yet. You guys can tell me in the comments if that's true. But what basically happens is he does a lot of like from nature, various hands, he gives references of that, and then we move on to drawing the figure clothed, and he starts to incorporate fingers and so forth. But generally, if you analyze the hand, you can draw your own hand just like this. You can analyze the overall form, which is very similar. If you draw the overall form, it's very similar to what Loomis has been drawing as our little mitt, or in some cases, I forget what he called, pads is what he called it. And now you see that we have these forms that you can then, as we've done with some of the Loomis heads, and basically underlying all of our techniques for this learning process, is working in layers by building a simple form that's easy to draw, that's the overall form, and then breaking it into its parts. And first, I would recommend drawing your hand like this, where your fingers are close to each other, so it actually looks even more like an overall shape. Of course, the thumb is different. We break the thumb into off here, so you can see that. And then we define where do the fingers begin. They create this arc that I can actually draw here. And that arc happens, you can measure it by this distance. Every hand is different. This is about the same distance as this, so you can lay that out. And then you've established where the fingers begin. Notice the contours of the shape, because the middle finger is generally the longest finger, followed by this one, followed by this one, followed by this one. But basically, a good way of doing it is breaking it into, because the fingers are about the same width across each of them. So you need to divide it in the middle. and then subdivide those, so you've got 4 fingers. Now you've got a pretty good idea of it, and then you can find the directionality of the lines. How do they go? Like so, got the fingers, and then you can see that this one splits here, so we will draw that split. And we don't really go into fingernails at this point, so this is enough for our methods here as we are still drawing the simplified figure and so forth. And really the scope of this book does not go too much into fingernails. We've got some fingernails here and there. But there you have your basic overall hand that you're going to be putting into things. Now what happens is we open the fingers, we bend the fingers, we move the fingers, and they change and so forth. You can practice from various ones that he's drawn. That would be pretty helpful, I believe. But also studying from life is a very good thing to do. So with the top one, really it's an incomplete sketch, but he's basically analyzing the shapes that build up the hand. You have the wrist here, and then he's drawn his little mitten or pad as he describes it. And you can see how, if you're not including the thumb, basically it has this curve or this angle here, and you have basically this shape. And then he starts to define, these are not the fingers themselves, but maybe the pads that happen there. We tend to have these muscular pads that happen here, here, and there. And then we have these lines as if looking at the hand this way. So he could be studying his own hand at this point. You have this predominant muscle here as you're seeing this. And then the thumb begins to branch off in the sketch. And I will take this one to show this ellipse that he has drawn here. So that he's beginning to analyze it in terms of shapes. Okay, so that this one, the wrist, also could be considered as somewhat of an ellipse. If we expounded upon what he's drawn, there would be an ellipse here. And we can draw the inside of these as being darker just to show our point that these are shapes that are carrying through. And then really just a layering method, following that Andrew Loomis layered method. This one, it seems as though we're building up in some ways because we're analyzing the hand without the fingers. So we have that general shape that he's drawn again, and then we have these muscles stretching across, and then these are the foundations of, this is the palm of the hand basically, and the back of the hand, but analyzing the beginnings of the fingers, and then some of these lines which indicate tendons. And then he's analyzing this. Okay, so maybe this is like a top view. So in this case, you're not going to see the underside like this ellipse. You're seeing the top view because at the top you see the tops of the ellipses. And there are 4 of them, of course, at the top here. And then we see a little bit of the finger there. So if you were to analyze it, you have this kind of cut off view of the thumbs and the fingers. And they have these, it looks a little painful, they have these little ellipses that are happening here because there are actually tubes for the fingers, basically. Then we do a similar drawing to what I did, and a lot of this you can see was probably drawn just by looking down or maybe through a photograph. But we have a miniature version of kind of what I've drawn here. These are all very simple in one sense because we haven't tackled fingers yet, and this one, there's no bending or moving. So in this case, he's analyzing the curves, the consecutive curves that you get. You get curves for the knuckles, you get curves for these joints, and you get curves for the next set of joints. You can follow those. Those are important to get their tracings correct. And they generally echo the same form that you see at the top and at the beginning. They all follow similar curves as you're seeing here. We can quickly draw in his drawing that he's done. I'm drawing it kind of like a mitt first, and then drawing in that hand there, following that curve. First curve is the knuckles, and then we can go over that if we want. Where's my, oh, here it is. There's my pen. Then you have the knuckles here, knuckles, knuckles, and knuckle. And then you have the little knuckle here. And then if you analyze it, this first joint on the thumb in the middle more or less lines up exactly with the knuckles of the fingers. So if you trace that line across, you can see that's true. There is a slight curve to it as well. So keep in mind of those curves, but analyze and study nature because that's going to really help. We'll do one more. We'll finish this one up, and then we'll do one more, like a bent hand or something that's doing a little more action, and then we'll move on. For the sake of time, we'll move on to the feet for this lesson. Again, you can see how he did something similar to what I did, dividing off those fingers. You need to know where they're beginning so that you can understand where they end. And these lines happen to the right, in this case, happen to the right of that right line of the knuckle. So I can almost continue that for each one of those. For these, you don't need to do one here. And you can see that your fingers do have that sort of overlap. They curve out, they have curves in them and stuff like that. So those are the subtle information that you're going to start to realize when you do a lot of studying from life. I do feel like I need to sketch out a little more on this one. So let's analyze it by the curves like we were doing earlier. The first curve there and the last one here, and then you just got the overall curve. As your finger has 1, 2 joints, and then the knuckle. Knuckle, 1, 2 joints. Okay. So, and every time you have a joint, you generally have these bumps on the outside, but you've analyzed. And I tend to leave the bottom undrawn because generally, depending on the angle of how you view your hand, the next finger is going to block it a little bit. So you have that one, and then the first joint. Then you have the second joint, and then following the edge of this curve is where the finger ends, and then we stop. Then we go on to the next one. There's really a lot of ways to draw it, but you're measuring what you're seeing and following nature, and you're trying to do accurate measurements and so forth. But and this one is really good for understanding these curves, which he's drawn as dotted lines that occur, and that all of the knuckles are not exactly parallel to each other, but they have their own symmetry, and they follow this curve, this geometric curve that kind of happens here. And in this case, he has drawn the fingernails, which a lot of times they happen where they have this curve at the bottom, and then they curve at the top. And they generally have that curve, at least from, everybody's is different, but you're drawing one part of it versus the other part. But every finger is different, so study that. You see just the tip of that depending on how long your fingers actually are. So we basically finished that sketch. Let's draw one of these hands in action, just showing the bending of it in some sense. This one's a good one. So when we draw this one, well, let's start up here. When we draw this one, he's got part of the wrist, and then let's just draw it. What would we see if we drew like he draws with just the mitt, something like this? Then from that we can expound upon it following these contours and curves, and we're really just following. But it's good to draw in layers like that, where we draw the outer border, and then we carve out the shapes and so forth following this drawing. And then that divides there. Then we can draw the arc of the knuckles. We have one knuckle here, one knuckle there, and there. And then we have the fingers, which you can draw as an arc. They radiate out, and they are separate from each other. At least this one is. So in that sense, I would just try to draw the negative space here, capture this area to get that curve and the angle this right to get its placement correct. Then you can go ahead and follow like you did here and hit those knuckles, well, not knuckles, but the inner, the middle joint of the fingers. And notice what's happening with the pinky here. It's going up, so that arcs up. This arc curves up more drastically if we're going to draw the arc, because that finger is bent. But now you can use the knuckle as a leading point and draw that one going out, and then the other knuckle bumps out like that. Everybody's hand is different, but you have that finger. And then the other one is still behind this one, occluded by this one to a degree, but then splits off here right about the knuckle. It changes its direction. And you have what I like to call these little pads, like fat pads or skin pads underneath. Every time you exit from a joint and you continue, you get these little bumps, these little pads and so forth, which is pretty cool. It's really beautiful, and it's a good way to analyze how to draw that. But you have that one from the middle, and then you have another one down here, which you can kind of draw, but it stops about here because this one's occluded. Occluded really just means that it's blocked. But we can draw in little areas. It's a study, basically. When something is so complex, and if you thought it was easy, it wasn't easy. So when it becomes so complex like that, you really have to break it down into its varying shapes and try to understand it from many different angles. So the more you draw, the more you're looking at and cross-analyzing and say, here's one way of getting to this end result, here's another way. This thing is made up of many different components. We have this part of the hand, we have the fingers, we have divide the section where the fingers are into that, we divide it and analyze it by arches. There's so many ways to do it, and there's so many positions of the finger that, like I've said in many of these videos, your best resource is going to be nature and studying many times. So here we go. We continue with this one a little bit. Bring that down. Doesn't have to be perfect. You've already analyzed a lot. You've already earned a lot and grown a lot just from what we've drawn so far. The fingernails really add a lot of detail to it, and they really say this is a hand, definitely. And keep in mind the angle of the fingernails. If the finger twists, you're going to see more or less of it depending on the perspective. Here, you're going to see a flat-on, top-down view, so you're going to see something like this where you're seeing the top. But if you draw it from the side, you're going to get something like this with just the sliver of the fingernail viewed. I'm sorry, tough camera, a little bit. But yeah, you can see it there. It's just a little bit viewed. I think that's what happens when you try to become bilingual. You start to combine words. Okay, so here we have the other finger, and then this finger, this third finger, third of these, not including the thumb, is going behind the other one. So you have that one being occluded, and then of course the pinky is curled. Pinky goes behind that one, so you don't even see it, because you have the knuckle, and then the pinky arches up, is bent, and then gets covered by this finger. And there you go. You have the fingernail, and then the overall shape here of the fingers. And everybody's finger is different, or everybody's hand is different, so that's kind of a tricky situation that you have sometimes. Okay, let us move on to the feet, because you've just completed the hard part. The hands are very tricky, and you can study that more as you wish. Pause the video, do what you need to do. But now we're going to continue on to the feet. And after we do the feet, we're going to be equipped to create our little characters to our heart's content. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be really exciting. Okay, now when he analyzes the feet, and the shoes are very similar to the feet because, of course, they're a layer of material that covers the feet and conforms to the overall shape of the feet, he's taken this three-picture approach, which I'm going to do the same because I feel like that is a solid way of approaching how to draw a three-dimensional object. Why did we not do it for the hands? Well, hands are so much more complex. We wanted to take it, orbit a little bit further out, and analyze it from the sake of understanding complexity of shape, and then we're beginning to bend the fingers a little bit because it's a little more complex. Okay, and you have to be selective about how you do things. You can't do everything. Let's draw this nice and neat. draw ourselves a little grid here, just like we are duplicating what he's done on the left here. And we will draw the feet from 3 different angles to understand them. In the past, he drew the feet as pads. And the thing about a pad is it's kind of like a 2-dimensional shape that suggests things. It suggests, for instance, that we might be seeing it from the side and we have height. It definitely suggests a length. But it also does not discriminate whether we are drawing, if we analyze this shape even more, if we're drawing something like this, or if we're drawing something like this. You see what I mean? It has, by just drawing a simple shape, we've roughed in the shape. Now, when he wants to show foreshortening, he'll show the pad like this, which means that if for example, we rotated the foot and we were drawing the foot like this, but then we wanted to show the front, we can be seeing it like this. So the circle, or the rough line that he draws and calls a pad, is a great way of capturing something which could be complex later on and detailed out in a very simple stroke. Okay, so now we're in the first one, we are drawing a simple side view, which I think that a great way to analyze the foot is it's just like anything else, is its overall shape, which is kind of like a shoe, basically. Imagine that. And then you, on top of that, you can define the shape more. You have a slight, this goes up slightly and then back down. And then it stops here and then breaks into the various toes that you see here on the feet. And again, note of caution, everybody's feet are different, so you're going to see different things depending on what subject you're drawing. There's a slight curve here, then it changes angle, goes up. You have the top of the foot here, and then we have the feet going up into the heel. Key anatomy is understanding that the feet has these fat pads or cushions on the side that kind of push out in this direction. And so he's drawn that little bit of anatomy there as well. And there's, of course, the heel here, or the ankle, I'm sorry. And there we basically have the side view of the foot. Now, similar to what I've drawn here, we have the overall shape. And we have that shape somewhat like that, like maybe the foot of a duck at this point. But then we begin to extrude from what we've, or draw and elaborate on what we've drawn, defining the ankles. We have this slight indicator here, which means something. Let's draw that. And we have this piece playing out like this. We've got the ankle. And you have this piece, which comes out, which is that side piece we talked about there. We talked about with drawing. By drawing, we talked about it. And then basically you can see how the overall shapes are there. And we are detailing it out, following this curve, modifying our previous layers as needed. And the toe sits here, comes in at this angle. Notice that one. There's an angle here that the toe comes in at this angle. You have the toe, and then you have that pad that sticks, that flattens out as the foot pushes into the ground. And then here you basically, so the larger daddy toe behaves differently because these toes generally stay parallel. And you'll notice too that the little toe does not go all the way to the edge. There is that cushion of fat that we talked about, or skin, that's tough, that flattens out, and you see the toe as seated in front of it. So from here to here, you can pretty much do the same thing we did with the hand and divide this into its pieces, like so. And notice that we have the little toe here. These toes tend to curl in like that. And there we have it. They have slight bumps on the top to distinguish that as they're seen from the side, they're actually curves. And then we have this arching line he puts here, which is showing what we've drawn previously, the angles and so forth. And then we have the toe, the front toe. So the front toe really goes, if you look at it from a top view, we have something like this where the top toe protrudes a lot, and the other ones tend to just curl in. So you may have the toenail like this, like so. I'm just drawing from imagination at this point. And these toes, all of them, except for the exception of the daddy toe, actually kind of curl down a little bit. Sometimes when you can feel them push out, then you can see the toes and so forth. But that's a general what's happening here. So the daddy toe. All I'm saying, note, is that the daddy toe changes compared to the little toes. All right, let's hop in and do this other side because we have two different anatomies based off of the angle that we're viewing these toes. Draw the line across, and draw that overall shape, which basically you can start as like a shoe. But keep in mind that this is not a straight line down. It curves in because the heel of the foot goes out a little bit, but don't exaggerate it too much. And really, the heel of the foot, if you analyze this shape, the height of this is shorter than the length. So if we took this over here, it would be a box like this if we were analyzing the shape, because the height is taller or shorter than the base is wide. And then we have a more exaggerated from this side, because the outside of the foot is like more close to the ground. But when we look on the inside, it reveals more of this heel that you're seeing here. And don't forget that this pad happens. So you're seeing a more exaggerated. And I think this is a common mistake that people make, is sometimes they think that both sides of the feet look like this. But the thing is that if you will notice that the outside of your foot is more of this flat line, whereas the inside shows more of the curve, if that makes sense. Now we can draw this would be the daddy toe, which you're seeing in the back here and you're seeing in the front here from the inside. And you can just feel your toes or wiggle your toes and you'll see that that's true. So we have basically that line, and then this goes up. You still have this peak as we drew here. The peak is right there. A lot of the anatomy you see from this side, because it's mostly a silhouette, reflects in both drawings. So the peak is still visible. Things when they're extremely lateral, like this line that's more flat and this more curved, that's different because it's extremely close to the viewer and not on the other side, if that makes sense. Then you have the heel. You still have a little pad here, and you actually have a small pad which he's taken the privilege of drawing right here, because what happens is as stuff pushes down into the ground, these pads get pushed out to the side. They're like cushions, natural cushions. And then we have the toes here, and just a unique set of curves and so forth. And here we have it. Basically, that is the foot. Now, with the shoe, it's very simple to draw this because it's basically a foot but more simplified into geometric shapes. Some shoes are more complex, but this is a great drawing, and this is a great drawing because it shows the base as a perspective, basically. We could draw it as a square, and then we could divide that heel off by doing that. We could divide the curve off by doing this, and then we could draw that shape as if we were extruding it, beginning with a flat base, which is a technique that Andrew Loomis will recommend later on in the book as well. That we think in terms of how do we draw these things in flat and then pull them up? How do we do that? So this is, at this point, is a silhouette or a flat down silhouette, but following these lines of perspective, which is really cool. And we follow that like that. Then, once we have that flat heel or flat sole of the foot, of the shoe, I'm sorry. Then he draws these little dotted lines that bring this perspective up and out, and we have the shoe, which follows the same thing. So we have this line goes up, so basically all these lines get extruded up like so. And then that line curves out, so we have, it's kind of complex, but you will see that if you follow these lines of perspective and you pull this up from this flat shape, it's pretty brilliant how it works. Notice how that heel changes shape, but then you have this form popping down here, meeting this one, and then going up, following this curve. All these lines get pulled up. This line gets pulled up, so the edge of the boot terminates at this point. It doesn't go any further this way. That's not going to happen. And we can block in the overall shape. And then we can draw this curve, which is a three-dimensional shape. Notice this peaks right in, just think about it in perspective. Where does this peak? Right about here. Draw that up, peak it off there like that. Peak the top of the lip of the shoe. And then basically it becomes this kind of semi-ellipse shape that goes like this. Very cool. And then at that point, if you've gotten this far, you've pretty much nailed it. You just have to put the details in, showing the depth of the actual base of the shoe, the sole of the shoe, going around this corner, and then going out a little further, and the top of the shoe coming up here. Think in terms of it being like a three-dimensional shape, that lining up with this, and this wrapping around like so. This line is the front of it, but it could go around hypothetically because there's dimension to that, and this curves around. But the same thing is happening with the foot. Really, the foot exists within the shoe, and that's pretty much how that works. Same with gloves. Gloves exist around the hand, and if you wear a mitten, it exists around that. So a mitten simplifies by eliminating the appearance of the four fingers, so you're actually experiencing less. Again, that bilingual slipping out. Okay, so we have the top of the shoe, then with these little laces, draw and so forth. Okay, great. That was a great lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Do give this video a like, thumbs up. Share it with your friends, family, loved ones, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. Until the next video, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, and God bless you.